Alrighty, guys, let's talk. I can't believe it. I know I said this in the immediate reaction. I can't believe it. The second to last episode of one of the most pleasant surprises of the last many years in Star Wars and Marvel and DC and whatever, pop culture, blockbuster. One of the biggest, most pleasant surprises, Skeleton Crew. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion for episode number 7 of Skeleton Crew. Like I said, the second to last episode. So if you haven't seen the episode, then I would recommend saving this segment for later, coming back once you have, because we are going to be talking about the episode in full spoilery details. So again, full spoiler warning, here we go. I usually like to start out these spoiler discussions by giving context about how I felt about the whole season, but if you've been following along, and I'll just give any of you who are new to the channel, which by the way, welcome, make sure to subscribe, welcome to the Access Blockbusters crew, thanks so much for joining. Anyways, all that aside, for those of you who are new, I'll give you the TLDR. I've loved this show. Every single episode, I've liked, loved, enjoyed, had emotional moments, laughed, all the things that you'd want out of a Star Wars show, all the things that you'd want out of any show, Skeleton Crew has delivered. And again, I mean, there are a couple, minor nitpicks. For example, some of the episodes are ridiculously short. And I think that, I would have loved 40-minute long episode Skeleton Crew episodes. These don't have to be hour-long episodes, certainly not. It's just not, I don't think, the style of the show. 28 minutes is a bit short, don't you think? That's just me, maybe. That's just me personally. And I think, there are a couple episodes that, maybe feel a little close to fillerish, but it's really the characters. I said this maybe in the episode 5 spoiler discussion, where, at this point, it's because the characters are so strong that you can just watch them do anything. You're just excited. I'm excited every week to just spend time with these characters in this world. And episode 7, again, not to bury the lead, is my favorite episode of the season. It was just awesome. And we'll talk through some of the reasons why as I go through my notes here. But again, this show has just continued to surprise me, continue to amaze me, and I cannot wait for the finale. I am actively feeling that sadness, thinking about the fact that after next week there will be no more Skeleton Crew for the foreseeable future. Please, Disney Star Wars, you don't have to make season 2s of many other shows that you've done, because frankly they don't really warrant season 2s. And I'm not even talking about critically, I just mean the viewership numbers. But this show, I really hope the viewership numbers are robust enough, because if there's ever a time to make a season 2, I think it has to be here. So let's dive into episode 7 of Skeleton Crew. Before we even get into that though, or before we even get into the plot, one thing I was thinking about, I mentioned this in my immediate reaction as well, is, going into this episode, in a way, this episode to me, didn't have a lot riding on it because the rest of the season had been so good. But in another way, it had a lot riding on it because, and the reason I say this is because, if episode 7 was not good, and let's just say that episode 8 was not good, then I think overall my thoughts on the show would be really good show, very good show, really disappointing ending, right? Because I think, you have to say 2 out of the 8, if 2 out of the 8 episodes, especially the last 2 episodes of a show are not as good, then I think it's a lot harder to be like, well, it was just 1 or 2 episodes here and there. Like, it was the entire ending that kind of was ruined, right? But I said if episode 7 was up to par with the rest of the season, honestly, and I can say this now because I loved episode 7, honestly, it doesn't really matter how good or bad episode 8 is. I mean, sure, if episode 8 is just the worst piece of anything I've ever seen, worst TV episode, worst minutes of cinema I've ever seen, then yeah, I mean, it will diminish the show. But it's at that point now where it's like, this show has cemented itself. I love this show. Doesn't matter. I love this show. If episode 8 is good, and I have no reason to believe it's not going to be good, just based on the previous 7 episodes, I have no reason to believe that it's not going to be good. Fingers crossed, because Star Wars and Marvel have had problems with their finales, so we'll see. But I mean, if episode 7 is even remotely good, guys, it's not even close. This is the best Star Wars show that's ever been made. I stand by that. Maybe aside from Clone Wars, but Clone Wars is a little bit different for me because of nostalgia. But yeah, I'm so excited. So anyways, that was a thought that I had going into the episode. So we start out here with the parents, and I did not have the parents playing hot potato with a communications device on my bingo card, but there you go. They were getting stunned, and that was, in hindsight, it's a little bit frightening, but they kind of play it off as not jokey, but, they're literally playing hot potato with a communications device. I guess on a side note, talking about those shorter run times for previous episodes, I do kind of wish that we got a little bit more from the parents in the show. I'm not saying I wanted a whole parent episode somewhere stuck in the middle, nothing like that, but just, here and there, maybe a little bit more of, okay, we got to figure out where our kids are, because it feels like we get maybe 5 minutes of them at the beginning of every episode, but it's not really, it doesn't really matter. So anyways, we go back to the kids, and they are heading back to Aden, and I love the scene where Wim is all of a sudden sad, because it's like the kid who comes back from summer camp, I've had that experience. I'm sure you've had that experience where you're like, I'm really going to miss everybody, and I'm going to miss the adventure, and I'm going to miss the fun, and now we have to head back to reality and responsibilities. And I just think that was such a small kind of gesture to have in, that kind of scene to have in this show, but really good to include. And then the pirates appear out of hyperspace around the barrier, which, I thought that was AT-ATN. Turns out that's the barrier. It's really not AT-ATN. And I love, by the way, the Star Wars music / pirate music. It's, if you listen to it when the ship appears out of hyperspace, it's like the pirate version of a Star Wars song, and I love it. I love the music. I love the show. It's shot so well too. Even just a little scene, of that squid guy, that squid man, as Jod is like, go check it out for yourselves. Go figure it out. And the I forget the species name. I know that weren't they fighting with the Mon Calamari in Clone Wars? Anyways, I believe the species name started with an A, and you can totally correct me in the comments. But just the scenes where the ship is flying out of the hangar and flying towards AT-ATN, it's shot so well. It's shot so incredibly well. And then the kids save Jod once again, and Jod for all the good he's done, because I'm still holding out this hope, not hope. I almost think it is hope in a way, but I feel like just based on media and cinema that I've, TV, movies, media that I've seen before, it feels very much like Jod will get a redemption moment at the end of this series. It just kind of feels like that's where it's leaning. But this episode, if any episode persuaded me otherwise, it was this episode, because Jod is just a terrible person, but the kids save him once again by jumping out of hyperspace and distracting the pirates for just a second. So their ship gets, the Onyx Cinder gets trapped in the tractor beam, and then they basically, what's his name, Brutus, the Wolfman captain, they capture him in a giant claw machine, and Jod just kills him, which, yeah, I mean, you kind of saw that coming, right? Because it's Jod, and Jod is just turning into a worse and worse person every single time. And we do wonder if he's going to have a change of heart. They also, I said this, I wrote this in my notes during this part of the show, and I mean, the lightsabers come out a little bit later as well, a couple times, but they have to explain his force powers at some point, right? So, I mentioned in my immediate reaction that, there are mysteries that they're setting up really well, that they're answering, and then they're leaving some to the finale that I think should be left to the finale. For example, the supervisor. I think the supervisor, 100%, 99%, we're going to know who the supervisor is by the time this show ends, and I think it's totally fine to leave that for the finale. But maybe Jod's backstory would have benefited a little bit more from, getting some extra screen time if the shows and the episodes had been a little bit longer. I don't think it would have made much of a difference, in terms of revelations and plot and things like that, if we had gotten a little bit of Jod's backstory in the last episode or two. And so I'm a little, I'm wondering, are they just going to dump his entire backstory in the finale? I don't know. Seems a little odd to me, but we'll see. I mean, that's the one thing, I said in my immediate reaction. There's one mystery that I'm like, are you going to reveal that next episode, or are you just going to save that for what I hope is a potential season 2? Although I would like to know more about Jod, but I hope you get a season 2, so we'll see. Then we get a scene with the parents. They're sending in a hologram. I got emotional, guys. I didn't cry or anything, but I felt the tears start to well up. I got emotional when the mom said she loved the kids. I don't know, guys. It's small things, but when you get attached to characters like this, it's hard. It's hard to just see them as anything but people that you're, like, real people, real characters, you're seeing. And I love it. I love the show. And then, like I said in earlier on, I laughed. I almost cried because, talking about laughter, the line where I think Wim's dad is like, "Don't tell anyone where you're from," and Jod just mutters, "Oops." I thought that was funny. I thought that was really funny. But anyways, the next scene, so then basically they do the whole thing with Smee again, where they're trying to get control of him and who's in control of the ship, pirate rules and things like that. And I'm not going to lie, the whole unclaimsies thing that Fern did was silly. I mean, it was very silly, but, I think the show has earned that at this point, and so I totally didn't mind that. If, like I said before, different shows, based on their tones, based on how well it's written, based on their characters, can warrant different suspensions of disbelief. And this show, for me personally, has earned that. Again, in The Mandalorian, for example, if Mando's on that pirate ship, because remember, one of the pirates on the crew is one of the pirates that we see, I think, Mandalorian Season 3. If that, Mandalorian gets on that pirate ship, and then they have this whole, talk about pirate code, and then Mando's like, "Unclaimsies," and then whatever, I would have been like, "You're kidding." I would have been so annoyed by that. But it's Skeleton Crew. It's not Mandalorian. It's a little bit different, And so I think that is totally fine there. then then the ship is now heading through the barrier, and we see these giant lightning tower things, which is really interesting. And I'm sure we'll figure out a little bit more about the barrier if we figure out more about the supervisor as well. But it's interesting. It's very interesting to see what the barrier actually looks like. And then Aden is actually just a tiny little planet on the inside. But then, surprise, Jod is back. And before you could say anything else, because I was typing, I was mid-sentence typing like, oh, Jod's back. And then Jod decapitates Smee. Now, my initial shock, right? I literally had, my jaw was on the floor. I was initially just so shocked. I was, and I literally said out loud, I was like, no, you didn't just decapitate Smee. And then, the rational side of the brain goes, but there's no way he's not back in the finale, right? It's a droid, first of all, and, they'll find a way to bring Smee back. But it doesn't really matter, because that scene in itself was shocking. And again, it just shows you how invested I am in these characters. I was like, no, Smee, because Smee is the character that I've really grown to like in this show. And Jod, again, if there was a redemption arc going on here, I don't know. Episode 7 seems to really put a dent in it, especially with the last shot of this episode, which we'll talk about in just a second. But he's on his real villain arc. He's villain monologuing as well. He's talking about carving up the parents, and I'm like, yeah, well, we'll see. I really thought you had a redemption arc in you, but I don't know anymore. I don't know. So then we get them landing on the ship, and we get to see the Mint, which, by the way, the CGI, the visual effects shots are just so good as well. Whoever was in charge of this, John Watts, and whoever was supervising the VFX, just so great, so great. It looks fantastic. And you can see, heading into the vault, it's a giant IKEA. For those of you who've been to IKEA, you guys kind of maybe know what I'm talking about. It's just a giant IKEA of money, and the look on Jod's face, Jude Law, fantastic. He's selling all of it, just the giddiness, the joy, the euphoria that he feels when he sees this much money. It's just, yeah. This is his dream. This is his dream. In between that, though, we get the reunion between the parents and the kids. And if the scene with the hologram was emotional, this was even more emotional. Again, didn't outright cry or anything. And I'm not afraid to say when I do cry. This year alone, Inside Out 2 and Shrinking alone. Anyways, that's off topic. But, I didn't cry in this scene, but I got very emotional because it's so touching to me. And I know if you guys are not invested in the show, it just comes off as very cheesy and whatnot, but that's totally fine. I loved it. I thought it was great. And then Jod comes out with the lightsaber, and that's the end of the episode. Guys, who knows what happens in episode 8? Episode 8 might even just start out with Jod being like, surprise, just kidding, I'm a Jedi and I protected your kids. Or he might actually try to attack the kids. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, given that he threatened Fern to one-to-one combat. So, I don't know. This show has, again, what I said about it in the immediate reaction, I will say it again here. While I don't think it's nearly as good as WandaVision, because WandaVision, to me, is on a level of its own, honestly, amongst so many shows. It is one of my favorite shows of all time. It's literally one of the best MCU things I think they've ever done. But in comparison, to make the comparison rather, what I think this is like is that you have, how WandaVision is head and shoulders, to me, above the next best Disney Plus show, which I think is in the realm of a Loki season 2 or a Hawkeye, for example, even in the ballpark of Agatha All Along. But the way that WandaVision is head and shoulders above the next best show, to me, Skeleton Crew, again, finale could be terrible, and I still think this is head and shoulders above the next best thing that Star Wars has done on Disney Plus. It is so good, and I'm so glad that this came out at this time. It just feels like we need it. And with Andor season 2, we might have back-to-back amazing Star Wars TV shows to talk about, and so I am so excited about that. Guys, let me know in the comments down below what you thought about episode 7 of Skeleton Crew, and are you excited for episode 8? Are you a little bit sad like me? I'm a bit sad, I'm not gonna lie. And yeah, we'll see where this amazing show ends up. So guys, let me know in the comments what you thought about this episode.